We're on, but I am going to make a little bit of cutting and pasting while we're talking. But ladies and gentlemen, this is my guest, Dave Parlato. I always,
Actually, I do go by David now. So I'm David Parlato.
oh, come on, man.
Yeah, and as opposed to Dave Parlata, you know. Or as Terry Thornton used to call me from the bandstand because she couldn't remember my name. She'd say, Dave Plata. She would make it a syllable.
Oh, God.
Yeah,
Well,
that's me, David Parlata.
I'm just, sorry, I'm just cutting and pasting.
No
But okay,
problem.
so, so David Parlato.
Nice. Very
Thanks.
good.
Thanks.
Very melodic.
Thanks, man. And I'm just pasting who you are and stuff into
Okay.
um into Facebook so that people know that it is, and I'm changing your name, David Parlato.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
sure. And just a little bit extra. I don't know how we can like I said, usually we have music, but today was a little unusual. Featuring David Parlato. Yeah, it took me a while to spell your name right, too. I kept forgetting.
It happens.
Yeah, and it's been a while, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, David. It's going to take me a little minute to get used to calling you David. David used to live in LA. How long did you live in LA?
Since I was born, and then first time I moved to New Mexico was in 1990. And I was here until 2013, moved back to LA for about 9.5 years. And I've been back here in Albuquerque, New Mexico now since, well, almost a year to the day.
Ah, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, 1990. Okay,
right.
so 79. I moved in 75 there. So it was like 11 years. But those years were really happening, right?
Are you saying that you moved to Albuquerque?
No, no, I moved to LA
Yeah,
in
that's what I,
75.
oh
And
no,
so
very good time to arrive in LA, definitely.
yeah, and you were there and it was work we were working really hard, right?
Yeah,
Um
there was
yeah,
tons
yeah, that was, I mean, hate to sound like an old fogey, but that that was a great time,
yeah,
it just was.
no doubt about it.
Yeah. Um, yeah, what were you doing in LA at that time?
Well, I was just going to say that that's kind of right in the middle of like what I have come to biographically describe as my golden years,
Oh,
65 to 85. That's kind of inclusive. You know
yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a little extra on each end, but those 20 years were incredible for me. I took up the bass, the string bass, after some dental problems. I put it on trumpet, and I got I got a good classical teacher, and I got with Monty Budwick and started to do things. And then first name band I was with was Don Ellis, and they
Oh,
had a passion. So I was running around covering all these bass players things they couldn't do. Really led to a lot of work.
yeah.
Um, and I did a lot of jazz things through the late '60s, including that Warne Marsh, Gary Foster recording that I sent you. And I played with Shelley Mann's group for a while there, around 70. And
Wow.
yeah, I know. Then I got into electric bass, and I played. Actually, I I worked with Frank Zappa for the first time in the early '70s. I had about three different stints with Zappa in the '70s. So I worked with him in the early '70s, and I had a stint with Helen Reddy on the road. Then I stopped traveling and concentrated on studio work, and played both instruments, string bass and electric bass. And the way, to be fair, to describe it, I don't think I was at the top of anybody's list, but I was on everybody's list. So I did all the time. I did, and the variety was incredible. Like everything from live and jingles. to film music, to record dates, pop record dates, jazz,
Yeah.
uh, nightclubs. It was just like nonstop.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Pretty amazing. You know, I can sorry to say, I don't have the links you sent me.
Oh, okay.
But I have a discography from you from my friend Dan, and so we have a few people here: Roland Ascarones and Dan Davila and Nora Paradiso. Those are just the people who are showing up on the comments. But yeah, I'd like to check in on that music. Um, but let's just talk for a little while. You know,
Sure, sure.
it's it's been so long, and I don't even know how I remembered what you looked like. When I saw your face now, I was like, "Is that Dave Parlato?"
Well,
But I don't know. It was what's that, 40 years ago or 30 years ago or something?
I have a picture from that period. I think the photograph is probably from about 1970.
Yeah.
Uh, and I had full head of black hair, and I had a full beard,
Okay, well,
and I kept trimming it down maybe through the 70s. Actually, to be really honest with you, the a real turning point was the Manson murders, because I lived in Canoga Park, which was around the corner from Topanga Canyon. And after that happened, I literally couldn't go anywhere without being like really vibed in a negative way. I was like
wow.
being stereotyped as like a troubled person. So I just cut it way down, cut my look way down at that point. And then eventually I got to this, I when I shaved my head, I went, wow, why didn't I do that years ago? And it's very um, a look, that I've come to really be comfortable with. But yeah, people wouldn't even really recognize me at all.
Yeah, yeah. You were ahead of your time with the shaved head.
No pun intended. Yeah, exactly. I was ahead with the hair, and then I shaved my head. Where are we headed?
So it's interesting, you that you said those were the golden years, and I can't help wonder when somebody has like golden years like that, and then I mean, it's not like you're you're laying down dead now or anything. You're having a good time and working and doing what you want to do. But how does it? I mean, to be blunt, how does it feel to look back and go, "Wow, that whole body was so incredible."
Yeah, it's interesting because I was I was so engaged in the industry and doing everything that I could possibly do, because I've always meditated on the possibility that for some reason I would be unable to play, but I'd have a lot more years to live. So I always kind of had that going in my head, and that encouraged me to give it my all during whatever opportunities would present themselves. So when I look back on that period, I was young, I had a lot of energy, and doors just kept. I made a commitment to music, and doors just kept opening for me, and that was great. Then, like at the end of that period, say like at the end, I had like two TV shows, John Davidson and Friday. I did 4 days.
Sorry,
All
what was the second show?
it was called Fridays, and it was like Saturday Night Live, but it was
Oh,
done on shows. It ran 2 years,
okay.
and both those shows for like 2 years. And I made a ton of money, but I was really like, I was kind of unhappy with having to devote so much time to live TV. That's probably my least favorite venue to perform in. But between the change in the music industry and the introduction of punk music, which kind of encouraged record companies to sign the raw band in the garage. They didn't want studio players anymore. And so the 80s became a real transition period for me, and I really didn't handle it all that well, but I kept looking around for what else I was going to do, through that time period. And eventually, I got a degree in English,
Oh,
uh, and I did a lot of writing, fiction and poetry,
oh,
and so got interested in law, and I went to paralegal school and got a couple paralegal certificates.
oh,
And I had a job as a paralegal in the late '80s.
oh,
Time I'm working, but nowhere near what it had been for me, more or less by attitude and choice, I think, kind of a 50-50 balance there. Because when I look back, a lot of people did work steadily through the '80s. Anyway, I moved. I knew I wanted to leave LA. It was too busy, too congested. And I looked around and I knew Michael Anthony had moved here, Albuquerque, 1980, and we had been good friends for decades. So I visited and I loved it here. I love the high desert. And so the following, in 1990, by March, I was here, and just hit the ground running. He said, actually, it's a funny thing. I had the paralegal certificates, the credentials, right? And I had worked in a law firm in LA. So I got a job as a paralegal in Albuquerque. And it's so funny to look back. That's what gave me permission to leave LA, is the fact that I could have a job as a paralegal. But then when I got here, Michael says, call these 20 people and you'll be in the, and I did. And there was not enough bass players to cover the work that was here, let alone people with the background that I had, the experience that I had. So I quit the paralegal job and I never looked back. So it was a renaissance moving here because I started playing live music again and really loving it. I hadn't been playing that much string bass. I got myself a string bass, and I really got into teaching, which I had never had the time for during my quote golden years. And I found that extremely rewarding. And I got involved with an outfit here called the Outpost Performance Space, which is a concert not-for-profit venue that Tom Goralnik has been the president of for decades. They started just before I got here. And I created a jazz education program for kids at first. We started with about 7 kids. Matt Brewer, by the way, was the bass player in the very first group.
oh.
So that grew. We had like multiple classes a week in that. And then I started doing it with adults too. So, and then I mentored some other musicians to come in and be teachers, because there were too many classes. I couldn't teach them all anyway, but I felt really good about that. And it became a whole nother piece of my musical career. So I kind of look at it and maybe in decades, in chunks of decades, and like the golden years were just like I said, I was young, I had a lot of energy, and there was a lot of work. So I ran around and did all that work. And then I created other things for myself by moving away from Los Angeles, you know what I mean? And being in a place where I could literally do whatever I decided I wanted to do. I had a big band here for like 4 years. I did most writing for it, 17-piece big band, like kind of like a Gil Evans kind of a instrument, all that. I would never have thought of doing that in LA because there were guys that were heading up big bands and doing the writing for it. And I wouldn't have thought of myself doing that. I might get called by them to play bass only.
Yeah.
So in LA, denser thing, New York, the same thing. You're going to get put into your specialty.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People are going to think of you that way.
Yeah.
And then everybody's got their specialty. You move to a place that's more open, and like New Mexico, and you can just decide you're going to take it on because you really want to, and you never had the opportunity. So you do, Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. Wow,
Yeah.
you really, God, that is so cool, Dave. Just really, your space opened up and you just created whatever you wanted to, and you're enjoying it the whole time. So cool.
And to take it even further, I got to a point in about '07. I got to a point where I didn't want to play the string bass anymore, and I didn't want to. I kind of like stopped taking calls, and I decided that I had always wanted to do art, 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional art, and I wanted to get back into writing poetry and short stories. And so I stopped running around, and I figured, well, certain other musicians said, well, why don't you just work with the people you want to? And I said, no, I'm not. I'm going to take calls and say, well, I don't think so. And then another call, oh yeah, I'd love to. I'm not going to do that. So it was really good to just like drop the identity of being the musician and just go take classes where no one knew me as a musician, and I could just concentrate on other areas of creativity that I had always been drawn to. I did a lot of artwork as a kid. I've been drawn to them, but music was my forte, and I just did not have the time. So for a number of years there, from '07 until 13, when I moved back to Los Angeles, I did pottery for a year. I went to a pottery studio every day and did like work with my hands and made a lot of pottery. In 2012, I did a lot of fiction writing and poetry. I took classes in that. And then, like, jumping ahead, since I'm giving you this thumbnail sketch, in turn, I'm not really doing that much music. I didn't move back to LA to do music. I moved back. My mother was failing, and there was only one sister there, kind of burdened with dealing with that. And I decided, time to go home. I'm going to go home for a while. So I came back, and my mother stayed alive maybe another 2 years while I was here. And I was living in Ventura, and I was active in a church band, and that was about it. It was a very good band, but in any event, the pandemic hit. Okay, and I imagine everybody's got their
Pandemic story.
story. Mine was like, I did pretty well for about the first 3 months, and then even still we didn't know there was going to be a vaccine. Who knows when? Whatever. And then I have to say, I got really depressed, and I was walking every day. I do yoga. I bought myself a set of kettlebells. I mean, I was doing things in terms of self-care to kind of ward off, the depression. But
Yeah.
there was a dark period in there for me. And then I pulled out of it, and I started to reassess like who I am at my age. Okay. For the purposes of this interview, I'm 77 at this point. And I thought, what do I want to do with the time I have left? And I had not put that question in front of me prior to the pandemic. I was comfortable in Ventura. It's a beach, kind of a sleepy California beach town that didn't get overly developed,
Yeah.
But the pandemic really kind of, made me think about it. And I just came up with, man, I want to play, and I play electric bass. That's my musical voice at this point. And I didn't feature it happening in Los Angeles. I couldn't puzzle together coming down in your neighborhood, down closer to the center of town. And I went online and I looked at the rents in Albuquerque, and I made a mental note. I said, oh yeah, so I decided to move back because I can afford to live here. And I knew I would play more because I established a lot of contacts over 23 years that I had been here previously.
Yeah.
So at this point, to bring you right up to steam, like I play 5-6 times a week in different jam session configurations. I'm working somewhat, but it doesn't really matter. The main thing that I'm getting is like real high level jam sessions, really good players, and rotating. Most of the situations I do once a week. I rotate them through once a week. Bobby Shue lives out here.
Oh yeah.
I'm lucky to get with him maybe like once or twice a month at the most. But so it's like I've come full circle in a way, because that's how I started. The reason I got the Don Ellis job was because I was jamming with Steve Bohan, and I was jamming with the right people, and they recommended for work. Same thing with studio work. I was doing a club gig, and Jay Graydon was playing, and this drummer Gary Malabar came in, and he really liked my playing, and he started getting me on record dates, and So it's always been like playing has given me everything. in terms of like I play and that puts energy out in the universe, and then I get back whatever I'm supposed to get back, and it's kind of like my deal. I've made it so that as long as I feel like I'm putting that energy out, I'm willing to live with whatever happens. If
Yeah.
I make money, if I don't make money, if I get a call that's really good, or if I don't get the call, I'm okay as long as I'm getting that nurturing by just playing pretty much every day, with other musicians. So
I love that. If I was
okay,
with you, I would kiss you on the
that's
forehead, man. I love that. Seriously, that is just it's it's the best as far as I'm concerned. You move forward doing what you're supposed to do, and then the universe provides for you. And yeah, it's just a beautiful. That's so beautiful.
I told Gretchen that too when she was young, and she knew that she wanted to go for it, and we never.
And hold on one second, just to let the people listening know. So Dave is the father of Gretchen Parlato.
Yes,
Now
I,
you may.
I'm
That's
better
not
known.
your only claim to fame, man.
Well, I dad now. I don't have a real name. It's just that he's Gretchen's dad. Yeah. You
Yeah.
know, Judy and I, we could see that she had talent. Judy is Gretchen's mom, my first wife, and we never, we just totally encouraged it all the way, and I just said, you give it your best shot, and then whatever is supposed to happen for you will happen, and the rest is jazz history because doors just kept opening for her. She went to UCLA, then she got with Neil Turney, then at the last minute, I'm sorry, I said Neil Turney, I meant Tierney Sutton.
Oh,
She got Sutton was a big influence for her, and then Tierney recommended her at the last minute. You should audition for the Monk Institute, and they never had a vocalist, but Gretchen blew them away, and she got in,
that
and
was
then she
amazing.
moved to New York in '05, and she won that Monk vocal competition thing, and so and yeah, things have worked out really well. So I tried to impart that among other things to her, that um, you can't really know in advance how it's going to play for you, but if you develop, if you work hard, give it your all, then everything will turn out how it's supposed to turn out. I've counseled students that way too. Young people that are on their way to college. Should I major in music? Should I not? And I say, well, why don't you do it and get it out of the way? Because if you major in music, you're going to learn in 2 or 4 years if you've got what it takes. And then if you don't, you can let go of it and you can go on to being whatever your parents think you should be. But if you don't do it, then while you're young and you have the energy, you're going to regret it. You're going to look back and think, well, I did become, but I wonder if I could have been a trumpet player. I mean, so get it out of the way. If you feel strong enough about it.
Yeah,
And the universe will tell you if you should follow through or not.
yeah, yeah. Um, okay, I have a lot of comments here, and people are excited. They're excited. You're exciting them. Um, let's see. Well, Taylor Hatch is a guitarist at UNT, and he's actually interviewing Gretchen next week.
Oh,
So that's kind of cool. And Taylor has some questions, and Judy Ruffat from Germany, and she was curious, how did you earn money when you stopped wanting to be a musician and you did pottery, etc. Well, he already said he was the what was it? The paralegal, right?
well, I only did the paralegal for about the first 3 months I was here in 1990.
Yeah.
And I had done it like maybe a year and a half. I went to school and then I did it a year and a half in Los Angeles in the late '80s. So I wasn't making the money that way. I was still doing a lot of teaching when I was not playing the bass, because I sat down and figured out how little I was making running around playing multiple nights a week between Albuquerque and Santa Fe. I computed what the amount was, and I figured out, if I trigger Social Security, it's I'm going to be ahead of the game, and I can just reclaim all that time and energy, and I had kind of hit a point where I felt somewhat stale musically, like I was
Yeah.
just myself,
Yeah.
and I needed to like push everything off the table and have a refresher, so I went into some other areas, but I still was working at the outpost and doing the teaching, and I triggered my social security and a music pension.
Do you
A
do
lot of
you have you
people.
sold your writings? Have you sold your writings and your pottery?
I haven't actually. I've way too much, but I've given away a lot of the pottery, and I've kept pieces that I really like, and I've gotten some things published in short stories, particularly from the community college in Santa Fe, College of Santa Fe, community college, and then there's a big deal online these days. You can submit your writing and it can be published online. So it's not a hard copy, but so I
Yeah.
have it out there too, But I didn't make money. I didn't do those things to make money, actually. I did, and or to market them necessarily. It was more, again, the actual thing. I had dreams about working with my hands with clay.
Oh,
And so I went ahead and did it. And wow, it was just like so rewarding.
yeah.
So to me, it's always just the act of creativity.
Yeah.
If, you know, whether it's music or art or literature. And then, I've never had like enormous bills. Musicians would come to Los Angeles and they would get my name and they would call and they would say, "So how do I break into the business?" And I said, "Here's two things." I said, "You need to go out to the clubs and meet as many musicians in person as you can and make yourself available to jam. And if you do that, people will get to know what it feels like to play with you and they'll recommend you." Okay. And I said, "And here's the other piece of the puzzle: maintain a low overhead." Like, do not go crazy. Like when you are making some good money, that doesn't mean you're supposed to move into a big house. Like, put it in the bank, and then when a slow time comes, you don't just sit down and write songs. You, know, you
Very
wait for
good advice.
you wait for the next cycle. Because I
Yeah.
had this one guitar player. He called me and he said, "Oh, I can't believe I'm not gonna. I this TV show they let me go. And he said I'm paying $1,000. This was a long time, paying $1,000 of rent a month. And I don't know what to do." And I said, "Well, you know,
Move.
that TV show doesn't care what you're paying for rent." So, yeah, those are the two things. You got to get out and play, and you have to maintain a low overhead. That way, you maintain choices. You can reach a point where, if you want to, you can say no to something because it's not good for your soul. Even though you might think that you would get money out of it, you would think, "No, I'm just going to say no." Well, to be able to afford to say no is because you keep a low overhead.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And that first part of the answer, I told people all the time when they came into town. It's pretty obvious. Takes about a year but you have to go out and schmooze and play and because how are people going to know who you are? It's really simple. But yeah. Um, I have so many questions, but I know you guys are having great questions. But one question is when and where are the jam sessions in Albuquerque? Because she's visiting.
Oh, she's visiting Albuquerque.
Yeah. Or soon.
Okay. Okay. Well, actually, I can. Do you want? She can have my phone number, and she can call me, and she can meet me at these jam sessions. You
Okay.
know.
Do you want to say your phone number or just send it in the chat or something? Or I have your phone number. Do you want
Yeah,
me to
you
send it to
that
her?
I can say it. I don't mind.
Okay.
Uh, the IRS might call me. I don't know. 505
505
570
570.
9324. And mainly, when I came back this time, I hit the ground running because I had established so many contacts from being here 23 years.
Yeah.
So all I did was I made my list and I started calling people and said, look, I'm back in town. I'd love to play. And most of the people took me up on that, and that we just keep expanding. I haven't even still made, I've contacted a lot of people, and most of them I played with, but I still haven't even found time to play with everybody that I've contacted. So I get back up and say, when I very first came here, it was still a matter of just like getting a string bass and getting around and playing, So one thing leads to another. If you do one jam session and nobody knew you before that, and you played well, you're going to get called by everybody who was at that jam session to at least make another jam session. And if there's enough gigs, you'll probably get gigs from it too,
Yeah.
And the thing is, as you said, it takes a year. So, a lot of times when you meet somebody in a club and they're playing in the band maybe, and you say you'd like to play and you exchange numbers, you never hear from them. I mean, that happens, but you have to be persistent. You have to keep making yourself available. And, it's good to get a good teacher when you're new in a town, because that teacher probably has a lot of contacts in the town.
Yeah.
And so you can make other contacts that way, so have to make a list of all the venues, that are kind of music that you like, and, network and all the usual stuff, but again, I think if it's meant to be, you throw your energy in there, and good things can happen.
Yeah. And then I'm sure she can call you for this information too, but Joyce Glasgow, who's a creative artist and jazz fan in Seattle, she wants to know what the best outlets online or in print to submit poetry to publish.
Yeah, that's
A little deeper question, right?
it is, but you know what? I think it's called, you have to dig around online to get this, but I think they're called Duo Trope, TREE, and they were kind of like Expedia, like a travel, like a search engine. So Duotrope would go there, and they would have all these different online publishing situations, and they would have them graded as like which ones wanted science fiction, which ones did not want science fiction. There was like that. The thing to do is to just start going online and looking around, because the fact that online is so ubiquitous, much less expensive than hard copies of things. There are a zillion sites out there, and some are more competitive than others. There are more people submitting than others, and on like that. But it's fun, and if you want, again, it's like if you want to pursue that, you can. Successful doing it.
Can you quote any poetry for us?
Can I quote any poetry? Well,
I mean, of yours, obviously.
no, I don't think I really can at the moment. I like quoting I think of lines like Miles Davis saying, I'm always looking for what I can leave out." A Chinese proverb that says, "A man alone in his house thinking right thoughts can be heard 100 miles away." I like things like that. I like pithy haikus,
Yeah.
kind of like
You like Rumi.
I love Rumi. They strike you like a koan, like a little Zen enlightenment from a quick little phrase.
I love that. I'm friends with Stephen Nachmanovich, who wrote Free Play. Are you familiar with that book?
That book, yes.
Yeah, and that he wrote two books, but the Free Play was like that for me. Anywhere I opened, it was like bong. What a just really beautiful writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just writing myself a note to tell you something later. Okay, I must ask you about Zappa.
Okay.
Uh, you did a lot of work with Zappa and the grandmothers. I'm not really hip to the grandmothers.
Okay. So Frank Zappa starts out with the Grandmothers of Invention, right? And
Yeah.
his first album and first couple albums in like the late '60s really were groundbreaking. You know, they were real. The tracks were very long and they were bizarre, as he was wont to do. And um, it was a wild group that he had. He had like Don Preston, who was still alive, was
Yeah.
playing keyboard.
Uh-huh.
Uh, so he had that band, and they did a lot of unusual things on stage for that time. They
Yeah.
wouldn't be that usual now, but they were at that time, and they had X amount of success. Okay, and Frank really was like one of the masterful things about Frank Zappa was in the studio as an engineer. Like early on, he was like overdubbing things and like cutting the tape and you know making different tracks, erasing people off of the tracks and putting other people on way before anybody even heard about him at all. So he goes through a few iterations of bands, and actually, the original Mothers of Invention are very upset when Frank moves on from them. You know what I mean? And but that was Frank did that all through his career. He kept, changing the entire background that he had, and kept it, and that way, because he's a real control freak. Okay, so that way he keeps the attention on himself. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing was that he got very much. He wanted to be remembered as a serious 20th century composer. So he was always taking money that he'd made in the rock world and the concert world and putting it back into these extravagant, classical things that he had in mind. So he didn't feel that the original Mothers were capable, and they actually admitted it later in interviews. Not so much Don Preston, but some of the other members of the band were not necessarily that flexible and capable of playing the music that he really wanted to play. So he kept changing and changing. Then
Yeah.
he had about in the early '70s, he had a big group, which was kind of like a big band as far as the instrumentation. And he called it the Grand Wazoo, and they
Right.
did a recording. And again, it's like really his classical pieces, but not with an orchestra, with kind of like a big band configuration: trombones, trumpets, saxophones, rhythm section. And the bass player that did that recording was from England, and he didn't have a work permit that allowed him to stay here. So he went back to England. They needed a bass player. And Mike Altschuld, saxophone player,
Oh, yeah, I know that name.
was kind of contracting, the band. And so he called me and said, Frank's looking for a bass player. Would you want to come down and audition? I said, sure. So I went down, and Jim Gordon was playing drums in the
Uh-huh.
band.
Yeah.
And so I auditioned, and it went really well. And Frank came over and afterwards, and he said, okay, he said, you have the job, but give me the music. So he took the music. So the next time I show up, I open up, and where I was like resting before, I'm now like doubling the oboe. I'm like, my parts are like really much more difficult to play now. I'm like, what? And he said, it was too easy for you. I basically sight read his book. So he said, too easy. I want everybody in the band to think that they're only going to make their parts 7 out of 10 times. That's a direct quote. Yeah. He said, I want that kind of tension in the band. So it gives you some insight to the psychology, how he was always working to find how much he could actually get out of every individual player, and he got to know every individual player well, and he wrote specifically for them. He wrote a piece that featured me called Little Dots, and he would do that. He would, which is if you think of it, that's what Ellington would do too with the people he had, you know. So then he cut down that band. We did some tours and some concerts, and then he cut it down to 10 pieces and called it Petit Wazoo.
Oh,
We went on tour and he recorded all the time. Frank was always recording. So after the fact, like since about 95 or at least 2000, there's about 10 different CDs that have come out that is the Petit Wazoo that I'm on. And I was already on, you know, maybe 10 recordings. So my Frank Zappa discography is one of the largest ones, actually, because of the things that were released when he was alive. And then after the fact, they keep releasing things that I recorded, you know. And then I did Zoot Allures, a project with Terry Bozzio on drums in the mid 70s. And then in the later 70s, I did the huge project at Royce Hall. It was like a whole weekend of recording. And that came out on 3 LPs with no credits because Frank was having a hassle with the record company. And then years later, it came out on a multi CD that was called Lather, Lather, and it's very complete. It and gives credits, you know, throughout. So I would have loved to have gotten the credits at the time, but the way it is now, everything is credited, you know. So the main things I would tell people about Frank that I think people would be interested in is like, he was pretty much straight life. I mean, he smoked cigarettes and he drank coffee pretty much all day long. And occasionally I think he had something to drink maybe after a gig, like a Cavassier or something like that, you know. But other than that, he was anti-drugs, and he didn't want to know about people around him, you know, partaking. He felt that was really like a detriment all the way around. And he was prolific. We would be riding on the bus. He'd be writing a play. He'd be writing lyrics to a song. You know, he'd be at sound checks. He'd be. Hey, let's play this. He was constantly being creative, and I was very inspired by that. You know, because he got a lot in about 50 years. You know, he died from prostate cancer, which pretty early actually. He was not that old, and I think it was in the early 90s that he passed.
yeah.
So that's basically my Frank Zappa.
Let's hear something. Let's go and hear something. But I don't know exactly. I mean, you know, you can. Let's see. We're gonna go to regular YouTube. It'd just be so much fun to. Should I
Yeah.
look for you or Frank Zappa or what do you think?
Oh, I don't know if you're going to really find that much that way. Let's see. You want to, if you really want to be up to date, you could put in Cal Haynes Quartet. But if you really want Zappa, you know, I don't know that you're going to hear so much. You know.
Well, let's see. Oh, and didn't you have a funny story about Don't Eat the Yellow Snow?
Yes, I think he was right out on the bus when he was writing that. Actually, yeah. But I have a funny story about that.
Didn't somebody looked out the window and that's what I read on one of your when I was looking for a bio on you. Somebody looked out the
Yeah,
window and saw a dog peeing on the snow and that's where he got the idea.
yeah.
So does any of these I don't know if you can see this because you're on your phone. But I was just going to take a peek. Here's 1977 Frank Zappa and the Mothers. Muffin Man live. Would that have you in it?
Oh, that's what. See, the problem with this is that he was literally prolific. You know, you would have look for Petit Wazoo
Okay.
because
Petite. Yeah.
everything that's Petit Wazoo, I'm on.
Okay. I'm I'm going there now. Okay, so here's let's see. The blah, blah, life on the road. Uh your Montana Men's Gym, Harper College, 72.
You see little,
Universe.
there's anything called little dots. Can you find little dots?
Let's see. Yeah.
Play it. Yeah, because
2 live. Yeah. Let's see.
that feels
Oh,
you
wait a
wrote it.
minute. This is the, I'd like to see it, but let's see if we can play this one. Oh, audio. Let's see. There's a bunch of audio ones. Park Center Arena. Let's see about this one.
Yeah, now
They're all. I might not be able to find a video, but that's okay.
That's true because he recorded in a truck out on the street.
Okay, well let's listen then. We'll just listen to it.
the name of the song is I'm Not Satisfied.
Oh no, that's not it. Okay, I'm gonna just go up to the top. So this is yeah, this is a live version. Do you think live rather than the
Yeah, I
record?
think like
Okay, here's a live version. Sorry, what?
that's me.
This goes on for 18 minutes, so I'm going to leave at this moment. But
Yeah,
that's pretty fantastic, though. And he was coming out of my left speaker, the trombone player, and that was pretty cool.
that
So
was uh that was Glenn Ferris. Did you ever
yeah,
hear? Yeah, he moved to Paris, and he has been there. Uh, you know, he's been there way more time than he spent in LA. But he was the trombone player with Frank. Yeah.
yeah. And I saw who else? There was somebody else too. There was let's see, Glenn Ferris and Gary Barone. Oh no, Tom Malone too,
And Tom Malone
and Bruce Fowler.
and Bruce Fowler. Yeah.
Three
And
trombone players.
yeah, Bruce played a number of instruments. Oh no, I'm sorry. Bruce Fowler played trombone. Who am I thinking of? Tom Malone played a number of instruments,
Uh-huh.
and he ended up doing the David Letterman show for years.
Oh,
I would see him there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the first part of that, where you could really hear the bass, was like, I remember that was really fun to do, and that drumming is Jim Gordon during that.
Great, great drummer.
Yeah.
That the sound, it was very progressive, but it also had the kind of 60s vibe in there too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, almost like, I mean, there were parts of what we would do that would almost be like what would happen with the Grateful Dead, in terms of just like,
Yeah.
you would just be listening to each other on stage, and Frank would be kind of gesturing, conducting, but more gesturing to try to get people to dialogue with each other, or
Yeah.
for somebody to bring out what they were doing, for somebody to stop doing what they were, those kinds of things. They call it conduction. There's a whole
What is it called?
conduction. TI.
Conduction. I mean,
There's
I
the whole.
know people like Vinnie Golia has
Yeah.
done that for years, and
Right.
somebody, oh, I used to do that. Mozir Santos. He used to do that with his bands, and it's fascinating. It's totally exciting and
It is.
fascinating. I don't know how many people really have seen that in action. It's just great.
It's something. It's really wild to be in the audience and actually see it,
Yeah,
because then you get the thing between the person that's pulling the strings, the puppeteer,
yeah,
and the musicians. Whereas if you don't see that, it's not as informative. But that can be a very interesting way to play. To submit yourself to being conductioned, and listen to what the other people are playing. And you get to create all these different textures. So
I have to tell you that, I started booking some jazz in Kulak's Woodshed. Do you remember that place at all? I don't know. Maybe it was not happening when you were there. It's been around 23 years. Anyway, it's kind of a funky, interesting club where live video happens. And for years he supported, and he still does, singer-songwriters and acoustic rock and stuff. So bringing some jazz in. And last night we had a really exciting night of Cal State Northridge, two ensembles, and then a jam session. And man, the ensembles were great, and it was I don't know why I thought of that with the conduction, but it was really exciting. It was yeah, the play. Oh, I know why I said it, because these players apparently have a room open to them 24 hours a day, and they go there and
wow.
they play all the time, and they're astoundingly good, and it was very exciting. Yeah,
Yeah, and that Cal State Northridge,
Northridge. Yeah,
and so they were student.
yeah, student ensembles led by some teachers, Gary Fukushima, who's a great pianist, and Michael Mull, and so they're and the department head is a wonderful drummer who went to Cal Arts, Tina Raymond. Very
Great,
wonderful, creative, yummy
great.
drummer. Yeah.
I went there uh, when I first picked up the string bass, and it was called San Fernando Valley State College. That
Uh,
was That was its name before it became Cal State Northridge.
Oh.
And I auditioned. This is kind of a wild story. I auditioned to get into the school on the string bass, right? But I had just gotten the bass. I didn't even have a bow. Okay, going up in front of a violinist. He was a violinist, classical violinist, and I'm a young kid, and I want to get into the department as a string bass player, and I don't even have a bow with me, play, And I said, I'll play some blues. So I played some blues, and he talked to me. He asked me a lot of questions. He just kind of interviewed me to check me as a person, right? And then he said, I'm going to give you a chance. He said, you got a lot of work to do, but I'm going to give you a chance. Because I couldn't have got into SC or anything. They had people lined up, So I got in, and I immediately got with a very good classical bass teacher, Nat Gangursky. He was out of Chicago. And actually Mingus used to study with him when he came to town. So that's what saved me, because I got the really good classical teacher. And I too I signed up for every ensemble group that they had. I was doing all these classes of performing, and I only stayed there about a year and a half. And then I was working with Don Ellis already, Years later, I'm at Dorothy Chandler, and I'm backing up. I'm in a band that has a New York drummer, and I'm backing up Liza Minnelli. And I turn around, there's a string section, right? And that man, Myron Sandler is his name, he's in the string section, right?
Wow.
So I walk back, this is a long time after. So I walk back to him. I say, I have to really thank you, because if you had stepped on me at that particular point, I might not have followed through, but you opened the door and gave me the opportunity, and I said, I just have to thank you forever and a day, because that was a pretty pivotal point. Even just getting that particular classical teacher, because I got into the department, was a major deal for me. He became a second father to me, Nat Gangursky.
Wow.
He made a lesson before lunch, because he and his wife thought I was too skinny, and so they would make me stay for lunch, and they fed me. It's great.
Oh,
I forgot all about that, but
that is so cool, man. That's what really, that's why teaching is so gratifying. You really can change people, and even if they come and go, when they're there that there's something clicking, and they're, changing them, and and then of course it's up to them, but it's really a beautiful thing to be able to teach people.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Um, if I don't ask you some of these questions, that Taylor, he's never going to talk to me again. So let's see, Taylor. Let's see. Um, well, let's ask this question: is there one record in particular that has stuck with you for so long that you always go back to whenever you need inspiration or just need a moment where the music can just move you?
That's a really good question, and it for me it's like I have certain things in certain genres. Okay, like for me personally, I really like the work I did personally for myself that I did with Warne Marsh and Gary Foster and John Tarabassa, Ni Plus Ultra, and that's like a quartet album, and it was the beginning of something I still do a lot of, which is I play in situations where there's not a piano or a guitar. Like I'm playing the bass, and I'm doing all the harmony and all that kind of stuff. So I really like that. And when I go back and listen to that, I'm amazed that I was as young as I was, and that album holds up as well as it does, and it's gotten good reviews for years.
Yeah.
So there's. And then the great Miles things and Coltrane things, those completely captured me as a young man, and they still do.
Yeah.
I still to them, and I really like them. in classical music, and I'm very studied in all the classical music, Western art music is the better way to describe it. Stravinsky's ballets, including the later ones like Orpheus, Stravinsky to me is like just amazing. So there's that. And then in pop music, I still listen to, I love Toto, all the work that Toto did, and Steely Dan. I think they were, and actually, if you took those musicians that played on those recordings, they're on a ton of recordings in the 70s anyway, so. So I guess it depends on my mood. Sometimes I'm in the mood to really like calm down. I want like the space that you can get by listening to classical music. Or other times I want the dance feel. I want the pop feel, and other times I just want to hear what I would consider like true straight ahead burning jazz.
Yeah.
So maybe I hope that's a helpful answer.
Good answer. Hey, by the way, Stan Ayerhoff says hi.
Oh yeah.
He said he played with Glenn Ferris in Dr. Jazz and ran into him in Paris.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anthony wants to know what it was like working with Jim Gordon.
Jim was steady as a rock, to play with. And let's see. Yeah, he was a powerful drummer. He had a deep pocket that he would play out of. And at the same time, he could play anything that Frank asked him to play. Most of the drummers really were put through the ringer with Frank. And if they couldn't really play odd things as well as have a good groove, he didn't hire them, because when we were playing, Frank would say, like, now can you play a shuffle beat and catch all those figures? And the figures they were real off the wall rhythmically.
Yeah.
Counted it off, and Jim is playing a shuffle beat and he's catching all these off the wall figures. So he was a very well-rounded musician, and I had no experience with him that would have indicated he was going to end up the way he did.
Which was?
Not everybody knows the story. Would you like me to just give you do you know? You don't know?
I don't know.
Jim Gordon had a lot of problems psychotically, and eventually he murdered his mother with a hammer because of the voices. So he was suffering from, I think, hearing voices telling you what to do, etc., is a schizophrenic thing. So as the 70s wound down, he was starting to be paranoid this is all online. People have access to this information. He's in prison. He's still in prison.
Oh, God.
He had trouble, he was getting paranoid, standing in the corner on record dates, and then people didn't want him on record dates anymore. And one thing led to another. His trial was right after Hinckley shot Lennon. So the insanity defense was kind of like in disfavor.
Oh.
In prison. And apparently, I did some research, funnily enough, within the last month about him, and he doesn't want to be up for parole, and he doesn't want to take the medications, and they don't want to let him out if he's not going to take the medications. So I actually don't think he'll ever be out of prison. So it's a very sad story because he was everywhere in like the late 60s through the late 70s, those 10 years. I mean, he plays with Eric Clapton, he's on that big, actually he did the piano part on the end of Lila and stuff like that. He's on a ton of, and he was a great musician. Ricky Don't Lose That Number by Steely Dan, he's phenomenal, but there was problems. I was sharing with you before, I didn't realize you and probably a lot of listeners don't know his full story, that I didn't see that when I was working with him. what I did see was like he was totally popular with like everybody, and I got to realize that he needed that because he had so many women. I couldn't believe it, and it was like I asked him about it, and he said it's really good for my ego, and I just that line stuck with me for a long time, and then later to see what happened, I started to think, wow, so because in other words, he needed a lot of attention. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? He needed to be propped up in a lot of ways. So quite a complex personality, but and then later after Jim, I played a lot with Terry Bozzio,
Hmm.
who also is a phenomenal drummer. I mean, like just amazing, and he was really great to work with, very compatible. And the drum bass thing has got to be
Yeah.
with the drummer. It's just not going to happen if it isn't, And those were my two Zappa people. Unfortunately, Frank changed the band that I was in, the Petit Wazoo. Actually, I'll tell you the story. We're doing a New Year's Eve gig, okay? And Jim is in the band on the drums. And Frank is talking about recording after the first of the year, all this kind of stuff. So Jim, thinking that his girlfriend will sit on the stage right next to him at the drum, okay?
Uh-huh.
Frank's not having it, okay? So now it comes like, it starts out pretty calmly, like, no, she can't be on the stage. No, she's going to stay, no, she can't be on this. And, she stayed, okay? And Frank dismissed the band. I never heard from him after that. He had a new band
Oh my
after that.
God.
Yeah. And I often wonder if partly that was it. It might have been the trigger for like, I'm not having him around anymore, Jim Gordon, and maybe I'm going to change the whole band now. Although he kept some people, now that I think about it, because he kept Bruce Fowler.
Uh-huh.
Bruce survived a lot of reiterations actually, and Bruce's brother ended up playing bass. The sad part to me was that Ralph Humphrey started playing drums in the
Yeah.
new band,
Yeah.
and I had played with Don Ellis, so it would have been just beautiful to be in that band. And it had Jean-Luc Ponty, who I had also done some playing with. I got offered to work with him, and I didn't go out with him, but yeah. So that's one of those little dips in there, and then
Oh.
and I felt very slighted by Frank because he didn't call and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know, I know I was talking about recording the band, but I'm changing the band. I am going to record, but it's not going to be with you guys. But he didn't do anything like that, and I thought that was kind of like unmanly in my world.
Yeah.
But then later, I guess he just called me for special projects in the middle 70s, and then he wanted me to do the big orchestral things, because he really liked what I would do with what he wrote.
Yeah.
He wrote really difficult stuff, but I would make it my own, and he heard that and he really liked that. So particularly for the giant orchestral things,
Yeah.
I was included back in there.
That's a really deep story, your relationship with Zappa. Really,
Yeah.
like very intricate and yeah, that was pretty wild. Let's see. And then you've mentioned, and I'm not sure if I can hear it, and I don't know where I put it. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I seek organization, and then I don't know where I put stuff. But I'm very organized though, but I don't know where I put it. Anyway, so you must have sent me the jazz stuff, right?
I sent you. Here's what I sent you, and I can talk about them a little bit.
And maybe I can find them. Is it on YouTube or something like that? Sorry,
We're both on. Okay, look for NE plus PLUS Ultra, ULTRA. NE plus Ultra, and it's Warne Marsh, Gary Foster, probably under Warne Marsh.
Yes, I have Warne Marsh Ne Plus Ultra. Yep.
Okay. There's a bunch of tracks on there, and there's like, they were in the Lenny Tristano school. Well, Warne Marsh was for sure
Yeah.
with Lee Konitz particularly, but on the West Coast, it became Warren and Gary. They were playing a lot. So you could play something like Subconscious if you want on that. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I'd like to play some. That would be great.
And then I'll tell you about the group that I just recorded with. And
Okay.
that's the
Now, the only thing is, I don't know, there's no like locations to jump to. So here's the first track. Tell me if this is okay.
Yeah, it will be.
That's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Of course, I don't hear Dave in here. Ah, here we are. my God. That was fantastic. Wow. Wow. That is really,
That was stepped out of a dream.
yeah. And
And that
so, and who, I'm sorry, who was on drums?
John Terabassa.
John Terabassa.
He's been passed away for a while now.
Yeah.
And Warren is. Gary is still with us to the best of my.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So when you're okay, that was done in 1969.
Wow.
And the reason I sent you that is because I was recently listening to it again, and I was really enjoying it. And
Yeah.
then I sent you a concert that I just did on December 1st this last year here in Albuquerque with a quartet with no piano and no guitar. It not two saxophones, but one saxophone and a trumpet. And so if
I can find that on YouTube also.
you can, and you would look under Cal Haynes, Haines, Cal, C-A-L, quartet. And if you want, because we hear the horns, if you look for the tune "Embraceable You," it's a solo with just the bass, and
I see that. Yeah. Do you want to listen to that now? Can I?
that would be great
Okay, cool.
because they tie together. I mean, they're 50 years apart, but I mean, they conceptually tie together in a way. And I'm playing electric bass on this, but in any event,
Cool. Okay, here we go. Let's just see. Yep. Okay.
David Parlato, Embraceable You.
Cool, man.
Yeah. So that was just a couple months ago.
Yeah. That's so cool that you're I mean, you said that you're basically you basically do a lot of jams and
Yeah.
that's yeah, that's cool. I really love that because you're playing and having, you're doing all the right things with the playing, right?
Yeah. A guy called me for a gig and I said, my contract only allows me to take jam sessions, you know. Gig, and I said, my contract only allows, you know,
Yeah.
because I mean, think about it, it's almost more fun to just like, be relaxed and just like play, rather than get all dressed up and carry your gear into some like special venue. And then half the people are like not even paying attention,
Right.
still supposed to play in a way that you're trying to like communicate with them,
Yeah.
where you go play with other musicians and you just concentrate on like, we even play, at a jam session, we'll play a tune like Origin and we'll decide, let's play it a little slower and see what happens, and then play it fast again. So you do things that you would never do on a gig because you're just whistling through everything, And a lot of times at jam sessions, people do just whistle through everything, But I try to encourage like discussing what happened and what could happen, and just taking different approaches to different things. Playing a tune that's usually played really fast and play it not so fast, or even as a ballad,
Yeah.
like Beautiful Love,
Cherokee. Cherokee is good for that.
very good for that. Beautiful Love, a lot of people play that, instrumentally, they'll play it too fast to me.
Yeah.
And if you slow that down, it becomes a whole nother tune. You find all these different things involved in it. So I do find the not actually working that many gigs is fine with me. I wouldn't turn them down. It's just with the back being on the back end of the pandemic, there's not that much going on. You know what I mean? And a lot of the venues, if they do have music, it's not necessarily the jazz that I play. It's different. But it's fine. There's plenty of people, and everybody who's listening to this, there's plenty of people everywhere in the world that will be happy to play music with you. You just have to put the energy out there and find them. You don't have to be in New York. You don't have to be in LA. You don't have to be in the United States. You just have to want to find other people of like mind and get together with them and create.
Yeah. I have a weird question from Roland. He said, "Was that a kazoo belt you had on?"
No, that's funny. I get all kinds of comments about that. It actually is. It looks like surfboards at the bottom of the shirt, right? But they're actually, and they're pretty detailed and pretty nicely done. They don't show up until you get close on them. But so it's not a kazoo belt, but a kayak has the shape very similar to a kazoo. So I understand.
That was actually, I did notice that shirt. I thought, wow, I'd like to see my husband in a shirt like that.
Sure, yeah.
Beautiful shirt. Let's see. I have a question from Andrew, who's a drummer. Butch Miles lived in New Mexico for a while. Did you play with him? He was my hero.
The only time I got to play with Butch, there was a woman who was kind of in, she had some kind of notoriety in TV. Dee Kelly was her name. And she was here, and there was a potential of doing a TV show. And I got myself, again, wearing many hats, I got myself in the position of putting together a band for that possibility of the show. It was a small, like a rhythm section kind of a band. And she knew Butch, and he came in and played. And that's the only time that I got to play with him. There's a saxophone player here who's from here, and he spent time in New York and Chicago, and now he's back here, Doug Lawrence. He played with, he plays with Count Basie's band. So he played a lot with Miles. Fantastic drummer, but I only had the one glancing blow of an opportunity. I didn't play with him on a regular basis, unfortunately.
Yeah, and actually, this is a good segue question by Anthony. Um, he, he admires your playing, and he said, "What qualities do you look for in a drummer?"
Wow, that's a good one too.
Yeah.
Uh, well, what the qualities I look for in every musician that I ever play with is a team player. Okay, the concept of, like, when I was in high school, I played on a basketball team. I wasn't very tall, but I was good, and I loved playing on the team because the whole idea of the teamwork, So if I don't get a sense that there's the give and the take from
Yeah.
the other, that's not going to work, And then sometimes I was working with this drummer here, and he was very, he wanted to get approval from me, and so he asked me on the break, "How am I doing?" And I said, "Well," he was a young drummer, and I said, "You're not, you're not playing the melody, you're not playing the chords, you're playing an instrument where you would want to be playing the time. But I said, you're not really leaning into playing the time. You're just playing, you're being a colorist. In other words, you're letting us play the momentum and the time, and you're just kind of commenting on it with your coloring, So unless it's a really good drummer that I know is doing that for a creative purpose, and I know can really lean into the time, okay, this kid was not doing that, So for me, I want to feel instantly. I want to feel simpatico that we are feeling the time in a very similar way. Okay, I have played with some very good drummers where I didn't have that feeling. I auditioned once for Bob Dylan, and I didn't get the gig. I wasn't the right bass player for it. And the drummer who had the gig, I won't mention his name, but like, I couldn't play with him. He was feeling the time so back that I couldn't find it, to be comfortable with it, So the communication of the time, and then like the give and take, between the bass and drums, to be able to dance with the time and be creative with it, So yeah, and believe it or not, like the colors, like the symbols that a drummer will use, there can be some very off-putting sounds coming from cymbals sometimes. So, different drummers, they have different snare sounds, they have different bass drums, all those things play into it. Ultimately it's going to be how much the time locks in. That's why I got into jazz music when I was a kid, man. I couldn't believe how 4 or 5 musicians could just lock into the time so strong, So that's what I look for from the drummer. I want to get that.
On that Warne Marsh thing, you and the drummer were
Yeah.
gorgeous.
John was, really something. And, they were all, that was just such a gift for me to be able to do that, because they were all, seriously older than I was at the time,
Yeah.
So I benefited by all their experience, and they benefited by, I was bringing like a fresh approach to how to play the bass in the walking time sense, and soloing. I had a whole nother idea about how to go about it, and actually had some long discussions with Warne Marsh about it, because the whole Lenny Tristano school and Warne Marsh was like, the drums and the bass are supposed to sit still, and we're supposed to do the moving around, and I said, well, that's all well and good, but I'm hearing that when you move, I want to move, I want to create a tension, and then, when it can come back together, it can come back together, but I want to react to what you're doing. And, and John supported me in that, the drummer, even though he was more close in age to them, he felt that he wanted to explore what would happen between the bass and drums, and then they would work with it. So for that period of time, it was okay. I did get wind of the fact there were certain peers of Warne Marsh that said that I shouldn't have been on that recording.
Really?
Yeah, because there were more experienced bass players that would have played a more strict 4/4 bass time,
Right.
and that was like how these other people from the previous generation would have wanted to hear the bass doing that on a Warne Marsh album, and Warne would be playing, like
Yeah.
he played over the bar lines and over the phrase lines even, which is exciting, So, but it's interesting because a lot of time has passed now, and when I listen to it, I feel really good about what I did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really was like courageous to just do how I was hearing to do it at that time. If you don't like it, hire somebody else,
Yeah. Yeah.
I never said that, but I mean, that was like, I wasn't really taking that much direction except from the music.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah,
Um, Anthony also wants to know, do you prefer to play on the beat or on top of the beat?
I would on top of the beat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to play on top of the beat, kind of, almost like a surfer
Yeah.
riding a wave. You can. I like to dance around with it. Okay, and it depends on the situation. In jazz, definitely on top of the beat.
Yeah.
And I'll play with drummers that'll feel it that way too. And there's a way to do that where the time is very settled and relaxed as well. Now, on recording, getting in the recording studio and playing like with somebody like Jim Keltner, you know, um, or Jeff Porcaro, their time is going to be more on the beat, or even going into choruses of songs they're going to pull back ever so slightly. There's no reason a bass player is going to fight that. You're going to find how that feels at that time. But my natural jazz sense is to play on top of the beat.
Yeah. One time I was at the old Catalinas and I heard Kenny Kirkland and Jeff Tain Watts and Dave Carpenter. And first I was sitting there and I hated what I was hearing. I didn't get it, and Jeff Tain Watts was so ahead and it was
Right.
like weird. And then all of a sudden the penny dropped, and I saw that Dave Carpenter was holding the time, and
I'm
Keith
sure.
Kirkland was a little behind, and Tane was a little ahead. And my brain just kind of opened up, and it was great. That was a very enlightening moment for me, and
Sure.
and also that the bass player really has the time, I mean,
Yeah.
everybody has to have good time, but the bass player is it.
Now, sometimes that can be very frustrating for the bass player because, and I have said this, I recently said this at a jam session. I said, we played one tune, and I said to the piano player, I said, you're feeling on top of the beat. And then I turned and faced the drummer and I said, and you're feeling behind the beat. I said, I can do either one, but I can't do both of them at the same time. So I'm gonna have to adjust here somehow, and we did. We figured it out. We basically, the piano player was more experienced, so I encouraged the drummer to, like,
Adjust.
don't get lazy, get on top of it, listen to what the piano player is doing. But yeah, there's all those different time senses, and sometimes that particular combination probably was balancing itself out to where for the listener it was like magic in a way, because wow, how's that ship not tipping over?
Yeah.
But then I've heard Tane play live too in New York, and it's like it's overwhelming is what it is.
Yeah.
Like Tony Williams and what's her name, Cindy Blackman. These people are just overwhelming on the drums with what they do, and in a way, for my taste, in a way, it's too much
Yeah.
because it's like constant, and it doesn't have enough dynamics or enough variation, enough changes in orchestration, in density, to be musical in a way. It's a phenomenon,
Yeah.
like a mountain is, but it doesn't always satisfy me in that way. But
I
having
have a
said-
little I have a little quote that I tell my students. Too much of anything is boring.
yeah,
You could be the greatest thing on the planet, but if you're doing the same thing every moment, you
yeah,
don't want to listen.
right. Cindy Blackman, it was at the Outpost, this place that you just had the video from years ago, and she had a band, and she just towered above, dynamically and musically, above everybody else. There was a saxophone player in the band. I turned to a saxophone player that we were listening, and I said, "Man, I'd hate to be that guy in that, where she's the star." And there was this tune. They finished, and there hadn't actually been a drum solo, So I turned to the tenor player and I said, "What? No drum solo?" Because it had just been one big long drum solo. It's subjective, because in a way you see phenomenons like Buddy Rich, you see phenomenons like this, and in a way, if you would say to yourself, one thing I say to myself is like, well, maybe if I could do that, maybe that's what I would do. You know what I mean? But I'm not that kind of ego. I don't go after the music. I'd be very happy playing a track where I barely get into what I technically can do, if I felt that what I did was musically appropriate. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't need to be identifiable in, like, how many notes per minute or any of that kind of stuff.
Well, you're serving the music, right? Um, my friend Dan found you and Ray Pizzi.
Yes, I did a lot of work with Ray, and actually Chiudini, who you mentioned I listened to one of your ones from maybe about a year ago.
Yeah.
And John Chiudini was on a lot of the Ray Pizzi gigs that I did.
I just played with him recently. So good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had good times. Yeah.
Would you want to listen to this Killer Something with Ray Pizzi?
Sure. Killer Kowalski,
Ah, Killer Kowalski.
the boxer, I guess.
Ah, there's Ray Pizzi, man. Wow. Oh my gosh. Wow, that's really intense, and that was definitely Ray Pizzi, man. Intense.
I got to tell you a quick story about Ray. He was doing a film date, and it doesn't matter who it was, but like the composer asked him something. He said, "What's the range of that?" He was playing the bassoon. "What's the range of that?" And Ray said, "About 150 yards."
Oh boy.
He's got great sense of humor, that man.
He was a funny guy, man. His energy was so up there, man.
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
Pizza man delivers.
Yeah. Oh my God. And Gary Denton sounded really great.
Yes. And I think he played more than, I mean, I don't think drums was the only instrument that he played. I'm thinking he was a guitar player.
I'm thinking he was a guitar player too, and of course he had his studio,
Yeah,
which did a lot of recordings for a while, right? Yeah.
yeah.
But and John Chiodini, man, I don't know if I've heard no known that it was him when I heard that sound. I think
Yeah.
of him more as just a groove, wonderful player, and wow.
Remember remember that club called $2 Bill?
I played there for 2 years, I think. Yeah,
Yeah. I remember playing there with Ray and John,
yeah.
probably Gary,
We
or
might have
maybe,
played together there too.
I'm sorry,
You and I might have played together there too.
very possibly.
Yeah. I played there every Tuesday for 2 years, and with any band that that I could pull together, because they just paid $5 on a meal,
Yeah.
and then, so one time I had trumpet and drums, and me, so it was those were the growing years.
I remember.
So you played there with Ray and Gary.
Yeah. And John Chiodini, for sure.
Okay, I'm sure I was there. Maybe Roland was there too, because Roland, my friend Roland Askerons, he's here. We always make a joke that he's my first stalker because he he knew me back then. That
Cool.
was a long time ago. That was the early '80s. Yeah. We're coming to the end here. It's been so much fun to talk to you, and I truly hope that we can stay in touch.
I'm sure we can.
Yeah, it's been really fun to talk to you, and uh, you're so humble. I don't really. I just invite people on the show, and then I do a little bit of research. I don't go down the rabbit hole because I would rather be spontaneous in these interviews. But and then I looked at it and I was like, oh, wow, wait a minute, I just knew you here. So I
Right.
thought, oh yeah, Dave Parlato, and I love him, and he's so musical. And then I looked at your whole bio and hearing your experiences. You've had a very seriously satisfying career, and you're still doing it, and it's just I'm so happy to hear that. I'm really happy.
Yeah, hopefully I can be an inspiration for people. Like, you can always you can constantly reinvent yourself. I think all great artists that I look up to have been known for reinventing themselves,
Yeah,
taking breaks there, doing different things, coming back, and I feel like that's been my story too, and I guess it's part of a, if you get to live long enough
yeah,
and if you're going to be, you have to do that, because whatever you got away with communicating like 50 years ago, you probably got to do something different at this point. You know what I mean? So fashion keeps changing, and you kind of like, we have no choice but to adapt to it to some degree in order to communicate, so yeah.
yeah. Well, thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you being here. And
Yeah.
just to tell people what's happening, tomorrow my guest postponed Michael Dees, great songwriter and singer, but he had to postpone, and I've been so crazy busy that I decided to put up an archives instead of searching for a new live person. But Wednesday, a really great drummer from the UK, but who lives here in LA, Chris Bailey, and then going to have archives, Jen Barn and Stan Agerhoff actually, and Jonathan Widron and Henry Robinette for the week. And then for people here in LA, Wednesday night, I'm doing like a master class workshop at Kulak's Woodshed, and that'll probably be from 7 to 9. And you can come. The spots of actual uh, being one of the students who's critiqued are gone, but you can come and audit for $35. And and then Thursday night, the great Kenny Washington singer is coming down from San Francisco, going to be at the LA Athletics Club. Saturday night, sorry to do my little PR, but for people in LA, I wanted them to know Saturday night, wonderful band at Kulak's, Bob Shepard on sax and his wife, Maria Pugo, who's a wonderful singer, Derek Oles and Steve Haas, one of my favorite drummers. And then Sunday, I'm going to perform at the Urban Press in Glendale with a great band. My friend Cheryl Barnes singing with me, Mitchell Long on guitar, Edwin Livingston on bass, and Joey De Leon on congas. And if you're interested in real straight ahead stuff, John Mayer is playing at the G Spot with Derek Oles and Joe LaBarbera. So it's a busy week. We're just going to keep going no matter what they say. Dave, so nice to see you.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. Love you, man. Thank you so much. Bye.